Hashem al har Sinai B'chol ha'rayim esakayleis ha'rayim esashayfar ha'rayim esar Hashem Kol asher diber Hashem einaseh nishma.
Good evening, everyone. Just to give you a little background, the idea was we'll have a pre-dinner program for whoever is able to make it and whoever wants to come. Upstairs in the Beit Midrash, there's a capacity of about 180 people. And then we figured it would be a good idea to ask how many people are planning on coming to the pre-dinner program, which doesn't count to the timing of how long the program is. This is just extra. So we moved it down here because the interest was really huge. We want to really get right to hearing you speak. We're very, very honored to have Natan Sharansky with us as our guest of honor tonight. Rachel Sharansky Danziger, who might be a faculty member now at SAR, very, very popular, has been here since Friday, teaching a lot of Torah and really sharing words from her heart. We're very, very grateful to have gotten to know you and that you agreed to be with us this weekend. And we're looking forward to a wonderful conversation. And this is not a guest, this is really the community that was built by Rav Avi. To have Rav Avi Weiss here. Thank you. And we'll get to all of that later. So let's just start our conversation.
Very excited to get started. I will also just point out, Rabbi Krauss and I both feel a bit starstruck here. We, like many people,
so does everyone else.
Many people our age, we spent our high school years learning from the activism of Rabbi Weiss and working to chant, march, and do everything in our power to see you in person. And so it is a tremendous zechut for us to have you here tonight. We feel a bit starstruck, and I've also say I'm really excited about the opportunity tomorrow to be able to have both father and daughter in conversation here with all of the students in the high school. It's going to be an incredible opportunity for them to be inspired by you. Let's just get started. The first question really is for Natan. Yesterday or last week, with the return of Ron Gvili's body to Israel, it really reached a milestone. It was something of closure for the first time since 2014 that there were no hostages at all in Gaza. You spent 9 years in Soviet prisons, over 400 days in solitary confinement, sustained by the knowledge that Jews around the world were fighting for your freedom. As we process this moment that we've just come to in our own lives here with prisoners who were in Gaza and who are now been released, what do you imagine sustained those who were captive during these years? And what do you wish we understood about what captivity does to a person and also to those who wait?
It's a very serious question, and thank you for asking, and I'll answer in a second. But before, on a lighter note, I have to say, when we were interrogated, one of the ways to depress you was to put light inside your eyes. Why do we need to continue this experience? So, maybe it will help me to go back to that atmosphere.
And we're not going to be eating until 8:30.
And by the way, solitary confinement was not a torture. I spent in solitary confinement more than 4 years. 405 days it's in punishing cell, which is real tough in terms of cold and hung and so on, but that's a different thing. It's really great that we don't have hostages. And there are things which it is very difficult to compare, because after all, the Soviets were arresting you in order to force you to say publicly that they are right and we are wrong. Here people are arrested. Whatever they'll say doesn't matter. They have to be kept as hostages in order to protect terrorists. But with all the differences, of course, something in the psychology of survival and something in terms of peoplehood.
They listen to you.
Oh, thank you.
They listen to you.
No, it's very liberating when I see people to whom I'm talking to. Yeah, good. So there are parallels. And for people who are arrested, kidnapped, hijacked, and kept in this stage when they understand they can be killed any moment, it's very important from the very beginning to say to yourself that they cannot humiliate me. Whatever they'll do, it's theirs, it's not mine. Only I can humiliate myself. I remember this first experience, first hour of my arrest. And they abruptly take you from the press conference, then bring you to the prison, strip you, search you, remind you that nothing belongs to you. And then while you're still stripped, they start interrogating and threatening and shouting, and you say to yourself, nothing what they'll do will not humiliate me. Only I myself can do it myself. And that's a very important rule. And when our hostages went through all these harassments, I hoped, I prayed that they are taking the same rule to themselves. But they went out, and there was some kind of muting, not talking about harassments. I believe it's a mistake. I was telling everybody, we society are making this mistake that we are trying not to talk to. And when the hostages started talking about it openly, about sexual harassment, then immediately, first of all, you feel how they are relieved. Second, it makes them even bigger heroes. It reminds who we are dealing with. So this thing that we have our own world, and we have to be worthy of the image of God in this world, and not to try to be involved or influenced morally by the world of our enemies. And the second thing, of course, which is extremely important, is to feel all the time that my people are fighting for you. And they'll do everything to convince you that it's not, that you're abandoned, that you're alone, that only your behavior defines now what will happen to you. And you have to convince yourself, to explain to yourself, and something that's impossible to explain, but simply to convince yourself that the Jewish world, Jewish people, the state of Israel, your friends, nobody abandoned you. They're all with you. And you have to talk to them. And the only way you can talk to them is through God, how you can talk to them. And that's what happened to me when I started writing my own, not writing, inventing my own prayers. I didn't learn prayers, so I had to invent my own. And through these prayers, talking to God. I'm glad now my daughter is inventing her prayers. Though she knows all the prayers, but she decided it's not enough. But I didn't know anything else. And it was very easy and natural to speak directly through God to the people. And that's what I see now with our hostages. They're coming, many of them from absolutely secular, sometimes anti-religious society. They're coming, and they are much more close to this spiritual life. So that's what helps us as a people, and also this feeling of solidarity that we are all in the same struggle. That's what helps us to continue.
Rachel, for a lot of us, we just met you over the last few days, and you grew up obviously very much in the spotlight, although I don't know if it was that sharp. Talk about what that's like growing up in Jerusalem as a Sharansky, and how it impacted you, and challenges or
Thank you, Rav.
reflections.
First of all, I just want to correct you that I grew up very much as my parents' daughter, but not in the spotlight. Both me and my sister are extremely grateful to my parents because they made the principal decision not to put us in the limelight. We were never interviewed as kids. We were never on TV shows as kids. You know, whenever there was attention turned to my parents, they tried to keep us behind a screen of privacy, so to speak. And I'm very grateful for them because I think it's not healthy to grow up exposed. And then when you choose as an adult to go out into the world and raise your voice, that's your own choice. But when it's forced on you as a child, it can be very detrimental. So thank you. But I did grow up.
That's why Avitali refused to have a Hollywood film. So we sacrificed it.
I think you have a secret fantasy to see yourself played by Robert Redford. Without hair. But on a more serious tone, I gotta say, look, it's a hard question to answer because I don't have what to compare it to. I never grew up as somebody else's daughter. But I will say that growing up into this victory story, which my parents always shared with us, and they always shared in plural terms, meaning it was never their victory. It was the Jewish people's victory. It was a victory of people who demonstrated and marched and went to Solidarity Sundays and sometimes tied themselves to the embassy walls, or released mice to the stage of the Bolshoi, or all kinds of things. Growing up into this victory story made me always feel that it's possible to change things. So growing up, even when things seemed hopeless or difficult or too big to be handled, and I'm not talking about math tests, even though I dreaded those too. I'm talking about, you know, the situation in Israel, the war, things like that, terror attacks throughout my childhood, the second Intifada when I was a young teenager. It never made me feel hopeless. And even as an adult, when things got really dark after October 7th, I knew that I don't have the privilege to despair and say, okay, we just crawl into a ball and wait for the storm to pass, so nothing we can do. Because if other people had made that decision, my father would have stayed in prison and I wouldn't be alive today. So that's one thing that I really took from it. The other is, I grew up hearing from the heroes of the struggle, you know, Rav Avi, Rav Lukstein, so many wonderful people. And they all had their own different takes about what the struggle focused on, what was the thing that worked. You know, there were many different groups within it with different understanding of what's the right way to go about it. But one thing that came across everybody's accounts was the tremendous feeling of arvut, of shomer achi anochi, I am my brother's keeper, the tremendous ability to unite despite these differences and make a difference. So one of the things that's been really difficult for me in the past few years has been the feeling of lack of unity in our people. But whenever I look at it, I touch myself, I look at myself and say, I am alive today because even when we disagreed, we found ways to work together. So I know it's possible.
Incredible. That's really beautiful. I mean, you can clap, sure. I want to shift to Rabbi Weiss, but before I do so, I feel like I have to ask you a question, Rachel. I'm reading the minds of the people in the audience. You are a daughter of Russian emigres who grew up in Israel, yet your English sounds better than mine. How does your English so perfect and without accent?
Depends who you ask. I think the correct answer is my parents invested it, and I'm married to an Ole from America, so I speak English at home. My dad's favorite answer is because of Harry Potter, which is not true.
Rabbi Weiss.
Rachel was a very ardent reader, and she fell in love with Harry Potter. I don't understand why. She was like 10 years old, and she couldn't wait until the next volume will be translated into Hebrew. It usually took a few months. So she was reading it in English, and I didn't understand the half of the words, but then her language was as good as Harry Potter's. Yeah.
Incredible. Rabbi Weiss, for decades, you were extraordinarily active in protesting, in fighting for the Jews of the Soviet Union to make sure that when other people may have been likely to forget, you wouldn't let anybody forget. You were on the front lines doing everything possible to secure freedom. I guess my question is, at that time, what was giving you the strength? What was helping you meet that challenge? And I also want to ask, as you look to pass the baton to the younger generation now, what are you thinking about? What are your thoughts regarding the next generation who has to lead the Jews in this sort of spiritual activism?
First of all, I feel so uncomfortable being here with Natan and with you, Rachel, because it's humbling. Natan Sharansky is one of the iconic figures of our generation. This is something that I know Natan is very uncomfortable hearing, but that's the reality. I saw tonight, Natan, here comes a joke.
No, you have 2 minutes to speak, that's all. You're taking our time from me.
You know, you used to joke, Natan, that when you got into a cab after you were released, and the cabbie turned around in Israel and saw you, they said, I can't take any money from you.
Yeah.
And 2 months later, they turned around and they saw you, they said, I need a kachatzi, I'll take a half. And you used to joke that after 4 months, they'd turn around and say, what did you do? I have a son in Maglan. Natan, it's not true. You are an iconic. I saw tonight just everyone wanting to be in your presence, and it's uplifting. But your greatest contribution, Natan, the Gemara says that at 120 years old, when we get up to heaven, the first question we're going to be asked, if we've been so blessed, tell me about your children. And that's really your great accomplishment with Avital, your Rachel, your Chana, really so. So in answer to your question, we in the West, I believe, were junior partners. The real heroes were in the Soviet Union, the refuseniks. And I think Natan would be the first one to agree, going all the way back. Boris Kocherbayevsky and Yosef Mendelevich and Ida Nudel and Joseph Begun. And Natan, they were the heroes. When we protested here, we were not at all in danger. Natan was in danger. They were the real heroes. We were junior partners. And the greatest of the junior partners was the husband of Frida Birnbaum, whom I feel is here. I believe she's here somewhere. Jacob Birnbaum. And Glenn Richter and our dear friend Jack Lew, all these individuals, Yitz Greenberg, Chuck Shear, Rabbi Lookstein, goes on and on and on. But the leader of those in your campaign was Avital. And I contend that you are who you are because of who you are. But we came to know you, Natan, in a way we did not know any other prisoner of Zion. we came to know you through Avital. And I consider those days tagging along with Avital to be really days of Kedusha. So I want to just spend just 2 minutes telling you about the greatness of Avital, whom I consider the greatest activist of the latter part of the 20th century. She was, and still is, a person of such humble strength, the epitome of the Gemara, B'makom gedula yesh anava, where there is greatness, there is humility. She was soft-spoken, very, very quiet. She was spiritual. I know when you get up in front of a crowd at a rally, it's rah-rah. Avital used to speak spiritually, in the spirit of Rav Kook. She spoke about your phrase, Natan, the unity of souls. When you said, maybe for myself, I can admit I made a mistake. But how can I do so? I would be betraying my responsibility to Am Yisrael. She spoke about the holiness of words, the horror that the Soviets are not true to their words. She used to speak about how you are the cork in the bottle. If the cork will come out, everyone will be free. And she used to say to everyone, your message, Rachel, your Ima would say, Lech kenos et kol haYehudim. Go gather all the Jews, and if you gather all the Jews, Natan will be freed. And on his wings, and indeed just a few years later, the doors really opened up. I had the zechut to see this with my own eyes. Once at an airport in Toronto, there was a young woman carrying a little child, and she ran up to Avital, first asking permission to talk to her. And Avital is the most approachable person. And she said, crying, she said, Avital, I want to introduce you to my daughter. Her name is Avital. I named her in your honor. And if there are women here between the age of 35 and 45, and your name is Avital, odds are you were named because of who Avital Sharansky was. So this is an evening to celebrate Natan, who I look up to as the hero of heroes. But it's an evening to celebrate the power of a woman with this spiritual, soft voice who spoke volumes, through whom we came to know for the first time this person on my left of such greatness.
About Avital, you can speak additional 2 minutes.
Rav Avi, actually, to everybody here whose kids have learned about Natan's story over the last 2 weeks, and I was in the ELC teaching Parsha, or learning Parsha from the kids on Friday, and when we finished talking about the Parsha, I said, can you tell me what a hero is? And they started telling me, yeah, Natan Sharansky's coming to school on Monday. And then one kid raises his hand and says, he's the guy who zigzagged across the bridge when he was getting freed. But I want to tell you that the reason why 1,800 kids and 400 faculty members focused meaningfully on this story this month is because you spoke to all of our students in the high school, all of our faculty in the academy. You literally, they came out of that session inspired by you, inspired by who you are, inspired by the things that you did, and really, really inspired to make sure that story. And I walked around the entire building and everybody knew what was going on, and this is not something, we have teachers who were born after 1986. We have a lot of teachers who were born after 1986. So we really think...
I just want to say something about
Sure.
SAR. First of all, there are so many people from this community who contributed to the Soviet Jewry movement, whose names should be known. They are known, but they gave so humbly, no one really knows about that contribution. One is the longtime president of SAR Academy, Jack Bentheim, without whom there would never have been the first large gathering in Madison Square Garden, which he guaranteed as only he could, and Ludi Jesselson. Do you remember the story? I'm sure Avital told you.
No, very well.
You know the story. When Avital came to Ludi for help, there was some kind of plan, some exchange, and Ludi said, of blessed memory, I don't think it'll work. I can't give you the money. And Avital walked out crying, and Mr. J ran after her and said, I can't take it. And he gave her a very significant sum of money. And a few weeks later, Avital was asking some of us, she said, you know, Ludi was right, and I didn't spend all the money. Do I have to give back the money that I didn't spend? And she went to Ludi, and he said, once I've given it to you, I don't take back. These are the heroes. And we know the heroes only of the West in New York, but there were so many all over the country and all over the world. And SAR, permit me, this school is so unique in its education. I said to my dear Jack, did you ever think of a school, of a college going beyond SAR? Or minimally, let me be the first one to suggest.
You heard it here first. Okay.
Let me suggest a Tochnit Yud Gimel. A year in Israel after high school, that's a Tochnit SAR Yud Gimel. So great is this institution. Yourself, Bini, Rabbi Kroll, Rabbi Hartstock.
Natan, I don't know if you remember this, but sometime in the middle of early in March 2020, you spoke to our community via Zoom. The reason was because on March 2nd, 2020, our school was closed for COVID, and at the time, the thought was that there's a virus going around SAR, and everyone felt really bad for us. And I mean, we were getting free concerts on Zoom, and literally, Rabbi Josh Lookstein said, "Oh, you know, you guys are really, you look terrible. Maybe I could ask Natan Sharansky to speak to you via Zoom." And what you did was you actually gave people tips about how to. I mean, it was a little bit of a different kind of solitary confinement where you could order pizza, but you did that, and you talked about how to live under pressure and in isolation, and maybe you could share some of those ideas with us now in terms of the challenges that we have and the challenges that we can learn from.
One thing was, then I was really trying to explain how you have to spend time while alone, closed at home. I don't think it's the situation today, but going back then to that wisdom. By the way, from that conversation you're talking about, I was asked to make a clip, and then this clip was going all over the world. People were saying how it helped them to survive COVID. But in fact, the things which I was saying is, first of all, don't put aims which don't depend on you. Feel responsibility for things which depend on you. For example, in my case, whether to survive physically doesn't depend on me. So don't decide that is your task, to survive physically, because then you are in the hands of KGB. Your task has to be a free person until the end of your life. So the same here. Don't put, oh, in a year from now, COVID will be finished, we'll go somewhere. You don't know when it will be finished, so don't make these plans. But in 2 months, I will learn another language. That's up to you. That's what I can do. And so the number of such advices that I gave, I can say in our situation, well, my daughter was writing about it many times, in this complicated situation, when such a polarization in America, in Israel, with hostages, what we had, and I was proud of my daughter. She was initiator of some of the demonstrations of people of different views. but united with the desire to pray for hostages. So we have to think what we can do in the next 2 weeks to make the situation better, not to think how we can overcome, how we can all agree on one thing. We will not agree on one thing. There are so many very principal problems who stand between us. But what another step we can do together, that's something what depends on us, and we have to think about it. And I have to say, in the prison, it helped a lot. I also know to the hostages, if you think not about how you'll run away from the prison. It's impossible to run away from it. But how you will remain free person in the prison, and what else you can do to strengthen this freedom. That's why when I was already on my way to freedom, they said to me, agreed, go straight. I said, agreed? Of course not. And why? It's keeping your free person until the last moment in prison. That's very important. I don't know if I answered your question, because your question was so general.
I'm curious, Rabbi Weiss spoke about the remarkable work that your wife did for the years that you were in prison. This is, if you can share with us what it was like that snowy day when you were released and you were reunited with Avital. What's some memories, something you can share with us so we could feel like we were part of that experience? And I also want to turn the question as well on this personal moment. Oh, there's some, yeah, there are a lot of photos up there. You can take a look. I want to share, I'm curious from Rachel as well. You know, you are a mother. You have children who you want to impart some of these lessons from your parents. You are the daughter of Natan and Avital Sharansky. Your children are the grandchildren. I'm curious how personally that plays a role in how you educate your own children. So first Natan, then Rachel.
Okay, I'll leave more time to Rachel, and I'll say simply that I saw many times in the dreams in punishing cell how I meet Avital, how I'm released. So many times it was like a film. So when you are not sleeping, you cannot permit yourself to be weakened. You have to be mobilized, so you don't have all these dreams. The moment you sleep, you see these sweet dreams. In the end, when I met her, it was much more dramatic than any film, by far more dramatic. I was taken straight from the KGB prison, brought to the big empty airplane, only me and 4 KGB guys. By sun, we see that we go to the west, then we land in Germany, then the American embassy takes me through the bridge to western Germany, then Israeli airplane with Avital takes us to Israel. There, our prime minister, our foreign minister, our chief rabbis, all of us, we go to the Kotel and celebrate. So it's straight to the paradise. So I really was afraid that that is a dream, and that I'll wake up. So I kept Avital all the days, and another day, and another day, and I was not sleeping for a few days. I think I was afraid that to wake up, to go back there. So that's in terms of emotionally. As to practically, look, as Avital told, it's not my phrase, when I took her to the airport from Moscow, next day after our chuppah, it was early in the morning, like 6 in the morning. When we came back to Israel 12 years after, it was evening. She said, for me, it's like one very, very long day. And that's exactly how we felt. And again, for many people, when they are suddenly released after all, it's like falling, because you are mobilized, you are tense, and suddenly you're relaxed. We were happy. We didn't have time to relax. We continued to struggle. There were people refused on prisons of war, conscience, and in exile, and Iron Curtain, millions of Jews. So we continued fighting. We became busy with the family. And so we continue fighting until this day. So it's a very easy life.
In other words, try not to ever relax. In answer to your question, it's funny, you know, the way my parents told us the story was never as a story. You know, they never sat us down and said, let us tell you a story with a beginning, a middle, and an end. It was always in conversation. And every year, our family, even though we live in Israel, has 2 seders, though they're not consecutive. We have the normal Leila Seder in Pesach. And 6 weeks earlier, on the day my father was released from prison, we have a family seder, we call it that, where we celebrate and, you know, feel our gratitude for my father's liberation. And in that seder, which we held since I can remember myself, presumably before I can remember myself, my sister and I, asked the questions. So we ask questions, and my parents answer, and the questions change, you know? When I was little, the question was, were there animals in prison? Then is, what did you eat in prison? Then, what was it like, you know, when we were romantic teenagers with dreams? We're like, what was it like to meet her? What was it like to be apart? When we were a little older, what was it like to rebuild a life together after 12 years of separation? That seemed very awe-striking all of a sudden as an adult. So when my kids were born, or by the time my own kids were born, this story has seeped into me. It's become so much part of me that when I, you know, meet challenges in my life or crossroads of decision, I don't think, oh, there is that story, maybe I can draw a parallel and learn something from it. It's just instinctive. It's just part of my internal geography. And I was really excited to bequeath it to my kids. But I made a mistake because I forgot how my parents told me the story. And instead, I set my kids down as soon as they were old enough to understand, and I poured everything I know about storytelling into the way I told it to them. I made the stakes clear. I sharpened moments of conflict. I made sure there was rising action and falling actions. I told them the whole story, and I would finish it and say, and then they arrived to Israel, and everybody sang, Hine matovu manayim shevet achim gam yachad. And my kids, thrilled, would clap and say, now tell us the story of Snow White. And I was very frustrated, and I tried again and again. And after a while, I understood the problem. I understood that I'm trying to control what they take from the story. I'm trying to shape the story for them. The way my parents told us the story, and the way we tell the story of the Exodus every year around the Seder table, or the 2 Seder tables here, is very different. We liberate the story. We let the kids ask their questions that come from their heart, even if the question ends up being, were there animals in Yetziat Mitzrayim, for example. But then what they take from the story is up to them. So I think what I learned when it came my turn to transmit the story, even though my parents, Baruch Hashem, do it as well on the Seder every year, it's that when it comes to the things that make us who we are, the stories that are really fundamental for us and foundational for our identity, we have to let the story go. We have to allow the next generation to take what they need and what serves them best.
Thank you, Rachel. We have a lot of questions coming in, and we'll try to figure this out, Rabbi Kroll, how to get to at least some of them. Rav Avi, you called me on the New Year's Eve at about 9:30 at night, and I knew what was about to happen. Because it was really cold outside, and you said, Benny, there's an inauguration tomorrow, mayoral inauguration, and I think it's important for people in New York. I don't think you called it a protest. For people in New York to stand outside City Hall and declare that we love the state of Israel. The state of Israel has a right to exist as a Jewish state. You asked me to join you there. And again, I felt I have tremendous respect for you, and I thought what you were saying was right, even though I knew how cold it was. You outlasted me. Nevertheless, you were there for I was there for about 45 minutes. You were there for about 2.5 hours. How do you find the strength to do that? And what do you think our generation, the kids that are growing up in this school, all of us, need to be doing? How are we doing?
The respect is very, very mutual, Vinny. I feel so blessed that our relationship is so close, and with your Abba and Ima. You know, many of the activists were asking after communism fell and Jews started coming out, will there ever be such a movement, such a unity? And I saw it these past 2 years. It's counterintuitive. These past 2 years have been dark years. I look up to God, I say, even if I don't ask why, I do ask, Ad matai? How many more funerals? How many more painstaking shivers and injuries? But in the same breath, it's like the seed that plants a tree on Tu B'Shvat starting tonight. And when the tree is in the ground, the tree says, oh my goodness, I feel so much pressure, so much darkness. And the ground says, Al tidhag, al titya'ish. From the darkness, a beautiful tree will sprout. And that's what we saw these past 2 years. And it was, in its own way, a microcosm of the Soviet Jewry movement. We marched then, and young people were marching now. Pictures of Natan and others in synagogues, pictures of hostages everywhere. There was something that was beautiful that was occurring. We wore bracelets then. People were wearing hostage necklaces around their neck. And as much as these past 2 years have been so difficult, me'achoshech yatsa or. The Torah says that God's first words and the headquarters of the meaning of a word is the first time it's mentioned. The Torah says, v'choshech al pnei tehom. There was darkness October 7th. Vayome Elokim yehi or. And being in Israel then, everyone joined Tzava. Everyone was in Tzahal. Some in the green fatigue uniforms, others doing whatever they can, whatever they could. My Toby, my Tovali, doing what she could, everyone trying to do whatever they could. And here too, people tried to do their share. I have so much kavod every time I walk through Israel and I see a chayal. And when I hear that he's a graduate of SAR, I'm especially flying. It's something to be very proud of. With all of the challenges that we face now, I am very optimistic. I am optimistic. What we need is to produce leaders who can inspire our generation to stand up and to show up as they have, and to continue doing so into the future.
I guess, Natan, I'll ask you to answer it, but then ask any of our panelists to weigh in. You fought for years to reach Israel, to build your life there. Rabbi Weiss, you spend your life advocating from the diaspora, building Jewish strength and identity here. Rachel, you grew up in Israel as part of that realized dream. Our families and students represented here tonight, and we are so, so proud of the over 65 SAR alumni who have served in this war, served Medinat Yisrael. Our families represented here are living Jewish lives outside of Israel. We're wrestling with questions of where we belong and how to build meaningful Jewish futures. In 2026, in light of everything that we've experienced these past years, and in general, how do you think about the question of where Jewish life should ideally be lived in Israel and the diaspora, or is this question itself something that misses the point?
Well, personally, I think that the best place for a Jew to enjoy both freedom and full Jewish life is Israel. That's my personal opinion. But as the one who worked practically all my life between Jewish communities of the world and Israel, how to strengthen this connection, I know that every Jew makes decision on his own, on her own, and I never wanted and don't want to be commissar of Zionism, meaning saying everybody, why are you still here, why you don't go to Israel. Though I was demanded sometimes by our government to say it, I never say it because I don't believe that that is the way to make Aliyah. People are doing this Aliyah because of making this decision because of very many reasons, personal and not personal. But what I do know from my experience in all the communities in the world, and I think I was in all the communities in the world, that we are disappearing, we are shrinking, except from Israel, of course. We are shrinking as a people. Assimilation is very strong. And there are only two balamim, two breaks. The AIDS, I think they stop it. AIDS, faith, and Zionism. If you have both, okay. If you have one of them, you can work with this. If you don't have both, your grandchildren will not be Jewish. It's like law of nature. So the thing is, wherever you are, whatever is your decision, where you want to enjoy the life of free person belonging to your people, to your history, so the connection, very strong connection with Israel is absolutely necessary. And I'm saying it because I heard from a number of rabbis, mainly Reformed rabbis, but a number of public figures, community organizers, that the time has come for us, American Jews, to build our identity without Israel. That, as one told me very beautiful, she said, for 2,000 years, Jewish people were building their identity without Israel. The time has come to do it again because Israel brings a lot of disagreement inside our community. And I can say that to try to build a Jewish identity without Israel is like a few hundred years ago to try to build your Jewishness without Jewish community. Why do I need Jewish community? It takes me back. I want to be successful in the court, whatever. I'll build my Jewish identity without Jewish community. That's more or less what saying those who are trying today to build their identity without strong connection with the core of Jewish identity, Israel. So wherever you live, strengthen your connection with Israel, but that's what your school is doing anyway, so we have to talk to those who are not doing it. Thank you.
Go ahead.
There is so much that our respective Jewish worlds can learn from each other. Going all the way back, it took me time to understand how fortunate we are as Jews to live in America. And there are people in this audience who help me understand the mitzvah of hakarat hatov. But once coming to an understanding of appreciating the greatness of America, in the same breath, if somebody were to ask me today, what is the future for Jews in America? I am no longer sure. I'm no longer sure. When I think about jumping to something else, the different education formulae of both communities, something we spoke about at Jackie and Gitti's table. I think Gitti made this point. When one thinks about education right here, a high school student at SAR, understandably, you can't get a better education than at SAR. But in your sophomore and junior and senior year, what are you thinking about? You're thinking about which tochnit, what year, how am I going to spend my year in Israel. You're thinking about which college. The high school was blessed with one of the best college placements, people, Michael Courtney, just unbelievable. That's the thinking. The thinking is, frankly, how can I be served? In Israel, it's different. Our grandchildren, the children of Ilana and Michael and Dina and Mark are here and so on, but their children, they went to SAR. Ilana went, Dina went, but Ilana's children, it's an army family. I'm wearing their diskits. One is in Gaza, one is now in training, and she's got a third one in active reserves in Efrat. When the women meet each other and they ask, how many do you have? What they're talking about is, how many do you have serving? And when I listen to these kids in their junior and senior year, what are they talking about? How can I serve? How can I give? Which pre-military school am I going to go to? Am I going to go to this mechina talking about Eli Sadan, his creation, this yeshiva? It's a whole different thinking. Our grandchildren in Israel didn't start college till they were 23, 24. And I'm no longer sure that the American way is the better way. If I could, I would have an edict in this country that when you finish high school, you're obligated to serve. I'm not even talking about the military. Serve, give to Shevet Leumi. And this is the education in Israel. Friends, Israel's a remarkable country. With all of the criticism we hear, it's a remarkable country. And I'm not embarrassed to say I'm in love with every part of Israel. It is something and a country we should be so proud about, and we should be worried that now there's a mayor of the city of New York, the city that boasts of the largest Jewish population of any city in the diaspora, who is an anti-Zionist, who fails Natan's 3Ds test, where anti-Israelism crosses into anti-Semitism. He fails the test, Mamdani does, of not agreeing that we should have a Jewish state, of demonizing Israel, of the double standard for Israel. We're living in a community where our congressman, Richard Torres, who could be the strongest supporter of Israel ever to be in Congress, where he is in a tough election fight because his opponents are running on the platform that you, Richie, you are supporting a country, Israel, that is a genocidal country. That's something we should be aware of and something we should be talking about very maturely about. Ashrei ha'am, join me in this prayer, sheyesh lo medina k'medinat Yisrael, Ashrei ha'am sheyesh lo tzava kitzva hagana Yisrael, Ashrei ha'am sheyesh lo giborim, k'chaveh hayakar shelanu, Natan Sharansky.
Like my father, I'm not going to say, this is the right way to live, that is the right way to live. Obviously, I choose to live in Israel, so I think you know what I choose for myself. But I want to speak to something else for a second, and I want to say that we have so much to learn from each other. You know, in Tanakh, right, Moshe Rabbeinu spends most of Sefer Dvarim warning us about the danger of becoming so used to success that we forget who we are. Other prophets, talking to the Jews of the diaspora, warn them about losing their identity, warn them about losing who they are. In other words, different prophets talk to different types of problems. And the kind of pathologies that we face in Israel, where we are the majority culture, which comes with tremendous responsibility to shape the state in the image of our deepest values, but also with the danger of falling into the trap Moshe Rabbeinu warns us against. This pathology is a real danger for us. You living here are facing your own challenges that stem from being a minority culture, surrounded by a very, tempting, beautiful, rich culture. Other Jews living in other places deal with living under persecution. Last year I met the Jews of Ukraine. They're dealing with their own challenges. Everywhere we deal with different challenges and we come up with different solutions. And we only have to gain if we understand better, if we listen to each other, understand each other's challenges, not with this idea that we have the tools to solve your problems or you have the tools to solve our problems, but as a way to inure ourselves against narrowing our understanding of what Judaism is, what it can be, what kind of way of life it can shape, and thus enriching our own understanding of how to solve our own problems, each of us where we are. And I think it's a shame that we sometimes shortchange ourselves by being so busy talking at each other and explaining why we are better or why our way is better. And I really hope that what I wish for us, like what I'm me'achelet to Am Yisrael, is listening.
Beautiful. I'm going to read one of the questions we received from somebody who scanned in. This question for Natan. Are there any decisions you regret about what ultimately landed you in prison? You can't change the past, but in retrospect, would you have chosen anything differently, and why?
No, I enjoyed my life so much, so I really don't want to change anything. Look, people believe really that this years in prison is like black spot that you'd like to forget. No, it's the years when you were mobilized every minute of your life. You couldn't let yourself to be demobilized for 1 second, and you have energy for all this. It energizes then you all your life. I was 9 years in prison, 9 years in Israeli government, 9 years as the head of Jewish agency. But now, when we old people have dreams, we are sleeping and we are seeing, and our dreams take us back to places where probably we are meaningful. I have to say thank you, though, frankly, that I never see in my dreams any government meeting. And I had many of them. Or board of governors of Jewish agency, such passionate discussion. I don't see it in my dream. But interrogations, punish and sell, I see all the time, and I enjoy it because I wake up and I feel that we defeated them. So this feeling of defeat, then it helps you to go even through the headache of government meetings, you understand? So no, of course, everybody before going to prison should marry the way I married and learn to play chess in your head. So I'm happy I had all this, and I don't want to change anything.
We got very many questions, and unfortunately not very much time for them. I think Rabbi Kol mentioned before, summer of 1991, we ran a Jewish summer camp outside of Minsk, actually in Radin. And one of the campers there was a remarkable young girl named Luba Kozlova. And we stayed connected with her over the years, and then a few years ago she became a parent at SAR High School. And she sent in this question for Natan. As someone who grew up in the Soviet Union, I would love to understand how you knew about the larger Jewish community outside and know that there was an alternative to the non-Jewish life that we had, given how closed the FSU society was then. How did you learn about the larger Jewish community? What did you learn about the larger Jewish community?
Well, if before I applied for Israel, somebody will tell me, okay, and take into account that you'll spend so many years at the refugee, and then 9 years in prison, and you'll be sentenced to be threatened to be sentenced to death, and so on. I'm not sure I would start, because nobody begins jumping into the death without knowing being ready for this. But I was lucky that after I applied for visa and got a refusal and lived for a few years as an activist and some moment becoming like a spokesman of our movement, I got to know many Jewish activists who were coming as tourists from United States, from England, from France, from Australia, but a lot from Philadelphia, from Miami, from San Francisco, of course, from New York. I met with Rav Luckstein. I met practically with most of the activists representing different Jewish organizations: Student Struggle for Soviet Jewry, Council for Soviet Jewry, Conference for Soviet Jewry, for 35. So I knew, first of all, how different are these groups, how Jewish people never agree on anything. And at the same time, how all these people who disagree, how devoted are to our struggle. And that was the feeling with which I went to prison. So it was much easier for me to face all the threats, to be sentenced to death, when you know that you are representing all these people. All these people are on one list of your accomplices. And you feel that Jewish people are your accomplices. And that's what makes you strong and confident. It doesn't matter what they're saying. In your head, you have different world. World of Jews fighting for your release. And when I was released, of course, the real world was like in my head, the real Jewish world, and not like what KGB was saying. So, yes, when you are ordinary Soviet, loyal Soviet citizen, you are alone. You're absolutely alone because all your Jewishness means that you must be the best in your class, and that's why I succeed in spite of anti-Semitism. When you're becoming part of the struggle, you discover that not only you are not alone, but you are part of the most powerful movement which changes the history. And that's what gives you a lot of strength.
On behalf of everybody in this sold-out room, I want to thank the remarkable people who are on this, in the middle of this stage, for the last hour of a really riveting conversation. I want to remind you that the program has not yet begun. And we're going to just hang out for 30 minutes. You could go out, come back in, and we will start at 6:30. There might be a ad hoc minion for Mariv over here in the corner. What an honor to have you all here. Thank you very, very, very much.
Exactly who I'm supposed to be. I'm perfect just the way you made me. As hard as it seems to live in two worlds, I could be at peace and still look for more. That's the life you gave me. The first step is admitting that I'm not where I wanna be yet. And as much as that hurts, I'm reminded I'm human.